I'd like to look at the way that the Jews reacted to their slavery before their freedom, as well as the way that they reacted to their freedom. In the second parak of Sefer Shemot, when the Torah describes the slavery that the Jewish people experienced, we find very little about the way that the Jews reacted or spoke about their experience. One of the only psukim that describe their reaction is when the Torah says, "Ve'yanchu b'nei Yisrael min ha'avodah," that the Jews were burdened with all of the work. Vayiz'aku, and they cried out, "Vatal sha'avatam el Elokim min ha'avodah," and their cries rose up to God, and ultimately God heard them and responded. And this crying out is noticeably inarticulate and undirected. It doesn't say who they cried to, but not vayizaku el Hashem. It doesn't say what they actually said, but simply that they cried out and God heard them. And it seems to be undirected, non-specific, inarticulate cry from their work. Why was their reaction in this way? One might say that at this point the Jews were inarticulate, they were slaves, they didn't know how to speak, they didn't have the language, the vocabulary, or the vision to articulate and direct their thoughts and their prayers. But I'd like to suggest a different view, and that is to compare this articulation to the subsequent articulations of the Jewish people. And what we find after their freedom was that they said some pretty negative things. Vayilonu kol adat bnei Yisrael, that they complained and they said, "Why do we have no food and no meat and no bread? Miyutein muteinei b'yad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim shivtein al sir basar." We would have been better off dying in Egypt. Lama ha'alitunu b'Mitzrayim in Sefer Bamidbar, Lamut Bamidbar. Why, God, did you take us out of Egypt to die in the desert? Because we have no food. V'nafshenu katza b'lechem ha'klolkel. And we are disgusted and we loathe the miserable food that you've given us, i.e. the man. So here, their complaints are articulate and directed towards Moshe and towards God in their negativity. And relative to this, Vayizaku, the undirected, inarticulate cry out, is actually much better. And I would say that it's really highlighting the fact that they didn't articulate their negativity in Egypt, and they didn't direct it towards God. Was an expression of their faith in God, that in the face of adversity, of their enslavement, they didn't complain and they accepted it. They didn't complain to God. They didn't say, "Why'd you bring us into this land of Egypt to die as slaves?" They never said that. They accepted their difficult predicament and didn't question it. And the only reaction is their suffering. They suffered but didn't complain. And I think that this highlights a tremendous strength of the Jewish people at that time and at other times, that in the face of the most awful circumstances, the quality that the Torah emphasizes is our ability to accept it and to not question, not complain, not articulate why it's wrong that we have what we have, and not to direct that towards God. And actually the challenge that the Jewish people have, as articulated by the Torah, is after their freedom, then they begin to complain. Once they had more, then they became ungrateful and inappreciative. And I think that the Seder attempts to correct that by culminating the Seder story and the Maggid story with Hallel, to say that we appreciate God even when we have little, and not only that, we even appreciate God when we have many gifts. And we culminate the Maggid with the Dayenu, with a recounting of how much we have to be grateful for, and a Hallel. And in this way, I think that the story of the Exodus and the purpose of the Seder is to reinforce the importance of gratitude, and to start from the negative and end with the positive, but at every step of the way, to always be grateful for what we have and accepting of the gifts or challenges that God gives us. Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Pesach Sameach v'Kasher.